Welcome to HAZCOM for Construction with the new revision of the HCS standard of 2012 in it. This standard is based on a simple concept that employees have both the need and the right to know the hazards and identities of the chemicals they are exposed to when working. They also need to know what protective measures are available to prevent adverse effects from occurring. What you will learn. We'll discuss .50, 1926, as well as .66, Hazardous Chemical Communication Program, what the new safety data sheets consist of, what new labeling and training requirements are, what a written HAZCOM program components are, how to assess the hazards of a workplace and an SDS, and we'll do a summary of HAZCOM for construction. Part 1. Explain the HAZCOM safety data sheet symbols. Okay, here we can see our first pictograph, which covers flammables, pyrophorics, self-healing, flammable gases, self-reactives, and organic peroxides. Here we can see the symbol for explosives, self-reactives, and organic peroxides. Here is the symbol for gases under pressure. Here is the pictograph for skin corrosion, burns, eye damage, and corrosive to metals. The symbol for oxidizers is shown here in this pictograph. In this slide, we see the symbol for acute toxicity, fatal or toxic. The symbol for health hazard, depicting carcinogens, mutagenicity, reproductive toxicity, respiratory sensitizer, a target organ toxicity, and aspirations toxicity is shown here. The pictograph, which is the exclamation mark, a new symbol just introduced for this standard, means an irritant, a skin sensitizer, acute toxicity, narcotic effects, a respiratory tract irritant, and is hazardous to the ozone layer. Part 2. HCS 2012 Employee Training under the new law. Components of employee training. The 3 ways of educating the worker: labels, training, and safety data sheets. All 3 components must be readily available to the OSHA representative, employees, or independent contractors. Multiple location businesses must have a copy of each location where the substances are present. Employers shall provide effective information and training on hazardous chemicals. Your supervisor or HR, human resources person, is best suited if the safety officer is not available. This training will cover your work area on your initial assignment and whenever a new chemical hazard is introduced that the employee has not encountered previously. Chemical-specific information must always be available through labels and safety data sheets. Training should cover all categories of hazards, covering areas of toxicity, labeling, etc. Minimum training calls for the following. Number 1, methods and observations that may be used to detect the presence or release of hazardous chemicals. Number 2, the physical, health, and simple asphyxiation, combustible dust, and pyrophoric hazards, as well as hazards not otherwise classified. Number 3, measures that the company employees can take to protect themselves from these hazards, including specific procedures that the company has taken to protect the worker. Part 3, the new safety data sheet infos and existing information. The safety data sheet product identifier. This calls for a product identifier in the label along with other means of identification. It is recommended for the use of substance and restrictions. It calls for the name, address, telephone number of the manufacturer, importer, or other responsible party, as well as an emergency number if it's available. The new safety data sheet calls for, when a mixture is not classified, a statement must be made to that effect. It calls for the classification of the substance according to 1910-1200. It uses a signal word, a hazard statement, a symbol, or precautionary statement will be provided. This will include an ingredient where unknown toxicity is used in a mixture of greater than 1%. Substances must have a chemical name, a common name, synonyms, a CAS number, or other unique identifiers. They will list impurities and stabilizing additives. The previous requirements, plus a chemical name and the concentration of all ingredients which are classified as health hazards, should be in a composite information on mixtures section. In this section, we'll discuss construction-based chemicals and HAZCOM communication program. Section 4, lead in construction. Lead in construction will be found in demolition, removal, and encapsulation, new construction and alteration, installation of products containing lead, lead contamination and cleanup, transportation, disposal, maintenance operations associated with construction. An exposure assessment for lead in construction. If positive initial determination exposure at or above the permissible exposure level, at or above, conduct monitoring representative of each exposed employee. You may use historical data and additional monitoring quarterly, as well as documenting all your work. Employers may use historical data, but they also may need additional monitoring quarterly. They will need to document negative initial determinations or no exposure at or above the action level. Additional monitoring is not required unless there is a change in equipment, the process, the control procedures, the personnel, the task, resulting in levels at or above the action level. All this must be documented. Lead in construction applies to all construction work where an employee may be occupationally exposed to lead. It is currently under a OSHA National Emphasis Program and applies to the installation of products containing lead. Okay, the way employers will comply with the OSHA standard is they'll have compliance methods which meet 1910.26. They'll have engineering controls, respiratory controls, a compliance program, mechanical ventilation, administrative controls, or just plain good work practices. Of course, the last and least effective method is personal protective equipment. In this case, respirator protection, while engineering and work practice controls are being installed or implemented. When engineering and work practice controls are not feasible, or where engineering and work practice controls are not feasible to reduce the level below the PEL. Respiratory protection must be provided whenever an employee requests a respirator, and must provide a powerful air purifying respirator whenever they request that respirator, and it must be protective against the levels of exposure. They must also implement a respiratory protection program. Housekeeping for lead in construction: maintain surfaces as free as practical from lead accumulation. Section 5, multiple construction sites and HAZCOM for construction. A construction HAZCOM plan for employers with multiple work sites includes a written plan elements, including a list of substances at the site, all safety data sheets, the physical location of the employer's HAZCOM program. Each site must have the name of the HAZCOM program administrator, as well as the site's phone number of the employer's HAZCOM administrator. Part 5. Parts of HCS 2012 that are the same as HCS 1994. Section 6. What has changed for construction with the new HAZCOM communication program? Labels on shipped containers. The chemical manufacturer, importer, or distributor shall ensure that each container of hazardous chemicals in the workplace is labeled, tagged, and marked. Manufacturers, distributors need to know this. Where the chemical manufacturer or importer is required to label, tag, or mark the following information: product identifier, signal word, hazard statement, pictographs, precautionary statement, and the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer or distributor is required. HCS 12 labeling requirements require that every worker know where the safety data sheets are, as well as what the proper requirements are for labeling. Every label on the primary and secondary container should contain the following elements: the specified pictogram, a hazard statement, signal word, and precautionary statement. Substances are mixtures that are labeled as to what percentage of the substances are mixed. HCS 2012, as HCS 1994, still calls for engineering to be the highest priority, then administrative, and then personal protective equipment. What are the elements of an employee hazard communication training program? Well, one would be using the safety data sheets and label procedures that the supervisor has made available, and each participant would then make 3 significant observations about the topic area to be handed to the supervisor. These topic areas would cover personal protective equipment, the health effects of the chemical, and emergency procedures they would need to follow on a particular material. What is the employee's responsibility? Well, become familiar with the standard. Have a department supervisor identify who the responsible staff are. 3 is identify hazardous chemicals in your workplace. 4 is have your department supervisor prepare and implement a written plan. 5 is department supervisors prepare and conduct a training program. 6 is monitor the program and revise it as needed. Where can you get more information? I'm so glad you asked. Well, the company should have a glossary of company chemicals that are easily available. There are MSDS, there are safety data sheet sites on the internet that you can go to. OSHA.gov also has grouping of hazardous chemicals. You should be familiar with alternative container labeling systems, as well as where the written hazard communication program is, and the regulatory agencies that may be involved with your particular chemicals.